And we're live. 7:14. I guess I was waiting for a photo to come over because if you see the thumbnail is upside down. But for some reason, my phone doesn't always want to. What I have to do is send that photo to myself, put it on my phone, edit the photo, flip it a bunch of times, and then resend it back to myself. For some reason, when I load it from my computer, the YouTube wants to flip that over for some reason. I can't stop them from doing that other than going through this procedure, which is silly. And then my phone decides it does not want to updates to see the photo and stuff. It's a whole thing. But today we're going to talk about. I just figure, hey, we have it upside down in celebration for for the boys down under. Today we're going to talk about supercharging versus turbocharging versus compound. So where we combine the two. So we did this. I've done this a couple of times. We've talked about this before. I've done this on an 03 Cobra where with Jimmy and Nathan from HP Performance, where we had twin turbos feed. They had a twin turbo kit for the modular Fords, and they used it to feed the Eaton M112 supercharger, the factory one on the 03 Cobra, which is really cool. Turbos feeding a blower, awesome. And there are a number of reasons why you would want to do that. We're going to talk about some of those and some of the reasons why you wouldn't want to do that. But we also did it. I did it not that long ago on one of the 3800s with the M90 supercharger with a single turbo blowing into the M90. We had an intercooler between the turbo and the blower, but not one after the blower. On the 03 Cobra, we had intercoolers between the turbos and the blower, and then also one after the blower, which is, I think, a better way to go because then you can help cool the charge air. And that's especially important because one of the things that happens when you're doing a compound setup is you get fairly high pressure ratios. You get fairly high boost levels, which is which is my argument against that. You have very high pressure ratios, but the gains that you get relative to that boost level are not that great. So it no longer is anywhere near close to the formula, which I don't personally like. So, which is why the argument is that if we take let's say we'll start off with our supercharger. So we have a 3800 V6. We've run the M90 on it. We run a stock one. We've run the Gen 3 stuff and the Gen 5 stuff. I did all manner of different kinds of things on that 3800. We had ported heads and different camshafts and blower upgrades and pulleys and all kinds of stuff. And we ran nitrous on it, which obviously works well because it works well on everything. We've done a lot of that stuff on the 3800. And the best power I was able to make basically with the blower so far and a ported head and a cam on an M90 was 445 horsepower. Honestly, I think now with this ported M90 that I have, I think we could do a good bit better than that on the 3800. With the right camshaft, which I might have now because I had a custom one done, with the right camshaft and even the ported heads that I have and not ones that are done to the level that they could be, I think that this thing would get beyond that. That was also with an intercooler borrowed from JPL. One of the viewers here borrowed his intercooler, which was helpful. We could run water methanol through it. That was on E85, which helps obviously on these supercharged combinations, especially when we're trying to spin the boost up. And we don't have, and we've talked about this before, that one of the ways that we were able to get the M90 to make so much power on the V8 when we ran it on the 5.3 is that we have a lot of NA motor underneath it. On the 3800, we don't have that. We have an NA motor that's probably 200 horsepower down from what the 5.3 is. And so the net result of that is the supercharger produces a lot more pressure, bad for a root style supercharger, high elevated charge temperatures. It's not moving nearly as much air. It's just not the combination just is not nearly as effective that way. But you can put sandwich an intercooler in there and that helps. But that's also, it cools the air, but it's also a little bit of a restriction. And so you have to balance those. You have to also, when we were running it, we did not have I remember, I don't think we had a ported blower on it. So we didn't have the one that I did where we just did some super richy stuff to it. And then we certainly didn't have one when we went kind of all in and did the unit that we got from the guys at Joker. So it wasn't fully ported. So that and combined with what I know now about doing these testing, that I think like then we could make more power. But we ran it when we ran it with just the blower, we made getting near 450 horsepower. When we ran it as a compound deal, we got a little more than that, 480 or so horsepower. Obviously, there would be more there because we could turn the turbo up. But as I said, the problem is that the pressure gets really, really high when you're doing that. When you feed 7 pounds into, like, if the blower's making 10 and you feed 7 in, you don't get 17, you get 20 plus. And so that's the thing that I don't like about it. I don't like the high boost pressures, and then the attending charge temperature, and I just don't think it's a good idea. But we're going to talk about why it is a good idea also. Then with the turbo stuff, we were easily able to get at 1 bar of boost, basically 14.7 pounds, 613 horsepower with a turbo. So we were easily able to make way more power than the blower combination, which that's not surprising. We have a bigger turbo than we have available blower flow. But since we've done 600 with VA, why can't we do that with a 3800? For the reasons that we just talked about, it does not work that way. You have to have a really good NA motor to make the blower work, to have it be efficient. Not just because you're cheating the system, but that's the way that's most effective. If you can get the blower so that you don't have a bunch of resistance against the blower flowing the air that it can flow, if you spin it at a given speed and you're not heating the air up because you're raising the charge temperature, then obviously it works a lot better. So anything you could do to make, good ported heads, good ported aluminum heads would be awesome on the 3800. And then a good camshaft and more RPM on this thing. And I think you could, like I said, we could do a lot better. But the easy way was to run the ported heads on the cam. And all we didn't even run a really good intake manifold on it. We just ran a hollowed out blower top on a stock blower lower intake manifold, and just with a plate on the back of it, and just flowed air through that with the turbo. Now, one of the nice things with a turbo is that since you're blowing through it, the throttle body no longer becomes a restriction, which it definitely is if you're really trying to spin the blower up. The inlet side of the blower definitely becomes a problem. Well, on a turbo, that's not an issue because you're blowing through the manifold and you're blowing through the throttle body. That's no longer an airflow restriction. So right there is a big change in power. The turbo is obviously also more efficient. It has a lower charge temperature. It's as a compressor, it's just a better deal. As an air mover, it's a better deal. So you can make a lot more power. But so let's talk about why you would want the supercharger. And we talked about that a little bit on the last live feed when we were talking about the Kenny Bell stuff. And that's that when you mash the gas, you have immediate boost response. We were talking about the comparison that I would do is try to get the gas down all the way to the floor before I'd see the boost gauge go into the positive side. And on the Kenny Bell stuff, I wasn't able to do that. It really did have immediate boost response. As soon as you'd mash the gas, you'd see that. And you obviously don't see that on turbo. But what about on a compound turbo? So you would see that on the blower. So you'd always have that. So on a compound setup, you should still see that and then see more boost response. And that's really the benefit of having the supercharger in addition to the turbo. So if you think about it this way, when we've talked about how to improve the low speed response of a turbo, if you have a turbo that's sized fairly good size, like we ran a pretty good size turbo on this thing, and if you have a good size turbo on it, what you want to do is make more NA power, especially down low, so that you can get that turbo to respond and come up and then be active and part of the program and do what it's supposed to do. It's the time between that not happening and that eventually happening. That's what people describe as turbo lag. Well, one of the ways to cure that is make that in that area, in that RPM range, make the motor make more power. Guys do it with nitrous. You can also do it with a supercharger. So if you take a motor, like for instance, if we had a turbo and we ran on an NA 3800, and then we ran that same one on a 4.8 liter or 5.3 liter, that same turbo is going to be much more responsive on the bigger, more powerful motor because it makes more power down low. Well, the way that you can get the 3800 to make more power down low, you could make it bigger. You could add compression to it. But the easy way is to put the blower on it. Don't run it NA with the turbo like we did. Run it when we did it both ways. But put the blower on the turbo or put the blower on the 3800 and then have it make more power because it's now a supercharged combination. In a sense, it's just a more powerful motor that is now has a whole bunch of extra torque to drive that turbo. So now the turbo response is much better. And one of the things that we see when I look at these all of these power curves, and that's that the turbo, yes, as always, the turbo makes more power and a fairly good bit here. I mean, we were over 600 fairly easily. But on the compound setup and on the blower setup, obviously on the blower setup, we have more low speed power, in this case, down below 3,500 than the turbo did. So when you're driving around and you want to match the gas, it's going to be there with the supercharger, and it's not going to be there with a turbo. It's certainly not with this turbo. Now you could put a smaller turbo on there and help the situation out. But it also is there with the compound setup because you have the turbo so that you can make the power that you want. But you also have the blower. So the blower adds a whole bunch of response rate to the turbo because we've made our motor essentially bigger and or more powerful. It's making a lot more low speed power. So the blower does that very, very well. So it adds a whole bunch of response rate to the turbocharged combination that the turbocharged combination by itself does not have. There's a penalty for that. Always. It's not all good. The penalty for that is that it becomes less efficient at any given boost level having the turbo flow through the supercharger. And now everybody's thinking, well, yeah, why don't you just have it bypass the turbo after that? Yeah, you can. That's a fairly complex setup to make all of that work in real world time. That would be difficult. It's not impossible. I mean, Lancia did it, and a few people have done it, but it is more difficult. And it's not something that the average guy is going to do. The average guy could put a turbo and blow it through and have it blow through the blower, and that could work. But it's in practical terms, they're not going to just use the turbo and then decouple the turbo and then have the turbo blow through the intercooler and bypass the supercharger and have the supercharger stop spinning and decouple itself. So you're also not getting the parasitic loss associated with spinning a supercharger, even though with it not making boost, it's not very much, but it's still some. You could get into all that nitpicking and do all that. And that would be cool. That would be awesome if you could do that and then get the efficiency of the turbo by itself, get the response rate of the blower. But again, that's nowhere something the average guy is definitely not going to be able to do that. But it goes to show you. But also, when you look at these 3800s, if you see the really super powerful ones of these that the guys have done, they're all going to be turbos. They're going to be turbos by themselves. But that doesn't mean you can't have a turbo and a blower helping the turbo, especially down low, because a lot of times if you roll up next to somebody and you guys want to go, stepping on the gas is what you're going to do. And if you can do that and have the extra power, extra torque of the roots blower and the immediate boost, and then the turbo takes over, that's kind of a nice combination. So that's why people would want one or the other of those three combinations. You guys let me know. We'll have a poll here. Would a compound turbo and blower be the ultimate street setup for boost? And away we go. I will say that there's another thing that we didn't talk about here on the compound setup is it's just cool. If you tell somebody you have a turbo 3800, they're like, oh yeah, that's cool. Or if you have a blower 3800, there's like, oh yeah, there's only about a bajillion of those around. But if you tell them you have a compound one, then people really like that because it's both. It's like having a twin turbo. But a blower and a turbo obviously is always better. Vern, Tim, Jimmy, what's going on? Compound turbos for the win. And then, yeah, this wasn't compound turbos, although there is an LS one of those up there. Paxer Nova, maybe the Torque Storm. I still don't understand the reason for wanting to do a centrifugal with a compound turbo. Like I would I would understand better a roots blower and a twin screw blower, or a roots blower and a centrifugal blower, combining those two. That makes sense because one of those is really good on the top. One of them is really good on the bottom. Those go together. But a turbo and a centrifugal supercharger is not a good combination because the centrifugal supercharger is not going to help the turbo spool up. By the time the centrifugal supercharger gets going, the turbo will already be spooled up. So I don't understand that. But it is a really common question. I'm going to a torque storm on my 94 Mustang. They're good blowers. Every time I've tested them, which is a lot, they've always worked exactly like they're supposed to. Wisconsin's in the house. I can't decide on a torque storm or a 200 shot for my Mustang. Why are you deciding between those two? Torque storm has a lifetime warranty and it's American made. Wish I could listen, but I'm at the public library. Are you getting some information there? Damien, I'm not sure what you mean by the word thoughts. Bank says turbo sap power from the exhaust stroke, but super sap power from the combustion stroke. Is this right? These supers noticeably increase cylinder pressure. Well, every form of forced induction is going to increase cylinder pressure. It's not necessarily going to dramatically increase peak cylinder pressure, but it's going to increase average cylinder pressure. And they sap power from the combustion stroke. Turbos would require very little power to drive compared to a supercharger. I can tell you that if you look at the power gains from them, they're dramatically different than a supercharger. Superchargers can take a lot of power to drive, but turbos don't really. Please put two M90s on an LS or a 454. So you're not particular about which one. Richard, am I risking my engine holding the nitrous during gear shifts? I'm worried because the revs dropped to around 3,200 on the first and second and 3,500 on the second, third. Is this a manual transmission or is it an automatic trans? In either case, you are potentially causing problems by having the button on during shifts. Because when the transmission is unloaded, the chance for a free spin is really high. I have a Ford top loader, dated 1964 on my Mustang. Nice. That's definitely OG. Richard, do you still have some low buck truck cams left? I do. Turbo only too much complication with compound, in my opinion. But we're seeing that. We're seeing a lot of people. I mean, right now it's kind of split. I voted no because I'm old school. Keep it simple. Roots and a Whipple and a turbo. Cubic inches in a turbo. And you could do all of those, right? I just see the complexities unnecessary. My turbos work well with a turbo, and I get the throttle response from having a manual or large enough converter. Okay. Some old Detroit diesel engines were compound boosted. Yeah, the two-stroke stuff, a lot of those were. Not all in on the blower turbo compounding. However, to reduce the blower restriction, you could easily open the bypass valve on the blower with a pressure switch and solenoid. Yeah, that's not going to bypass it, though. That's just going to eliminate some of it. LT1 heads on an LS3, is it worth it? No. An LS3 already has really good heads on it. An LS3 in 99% of the applications already has more cylinder head than the people are using for their motor. If a carbon street, nitrous is hard to beat. Use a 75 to 125 shot. What would be better, second or third generation small block? Third generation small block is an LS. Do you mean a first or second gen small block? AFR heads or an LS with AFR heads, you have to be way more specific about that. There's no general thing between small blocks and LSs. If you had a 600 horsepower 383 with AFR heads on a small block, and you had a 4.8 that was making 400 horsepower with AFR heads on it, it just wouldn't be a good comparison. Richard, very happy with the vlog. Okay. You've done a lot with the import scene. I genuinely appreciate your content. Yeah, I try to test everything, and I do like imports as much as I like domestic stuff. I'm putting together a G8 with a stroker kit, red hot cam. I just can't decide on what I should get for a daily with a stock converter. I was going to go with an LSA, but almost the same as a twin turbo setup. An LSA anymore is just not a cheap date. I'm building a K series for my BMW to make 1,000 horsepower to the wheels on low boost. It's not going to make 1,000 horsepower to the wheels on low boost unless your idea of low is a lot higher than everyone else's. I'd like to see 8,000 RPM and 10,000 RPM recipes for LSs and Coyotes 3800s. Yeah, that's not going to happen. 10,000 RPM is a lot of money. Interesting enough, I'm aiming to compound just like you're discussing. It's not hard. I mean, it's pretty easy to get working. Just put a rebuilt motor in my wife's 79 Scottsdale, and we're getting a lot of steam out of the passenger valve cover. Rings were opened up for boost, and walls were honed. Is it concerning? Yeah, it's water is always concerning. The first thing I would look for in what motor is it? Is it a small block Chevy or something? What did you put in there? I would look for intake leaks first, and then head gasket leaks, and then cracked blocks or cracked heads. Metric cars an automatic. Held the button during shifts in the last meet. I'm just not sure how common this is. The car is not a powerhouse. I ran 13.1 110 with a 100 shot. That's probably fine because the automatic is probably shifting faster than most people can shift manuals. So why do new cars with turbos have motor longevity problems? My guess is the people that are just driving them around at the stock power level probably don't have motor longevity problems. My guess is the guys that are having longevity problems have chipped them or otherwise modified them, flashed them, and now they're making a lot more boost. Engines are cool no matter who makes them. Have you done any 289 small block Ford testing? I have run a couple of 289 small block Fords. None of them have been that impressive because the ones I've run have been basically stock ones. I'm searching for a twin screw that will work for this. Sorry if I missed it. I'm adding an M90 to an LQ4 6-liter. Is there a point at which that the Gen 5 M90 will be a restriction with a centrifugal supercharger? You're going to have the centrifugal supercharger blow into the M90 on a 6-liter? You're having both the blowers on there? And yeah, just like with the turbo, for one thing, you have twice the parasitic loss associated if you're driving 2 superchargers. So that is going to be something. And then ultimately, yeah, the smaller blower will be in the way of the bigger blower ultimately. I did a ring gap at 25 thousandths, first and second ring, 157 PSI on torque storm. Yeah, that should be plenty safe. Jordan 5.3. He went through the whole thing. Okay. Kevin, you got a GMC Sprint. 2 M90s would be amazing on a 5.3 or a 454, twin T70s, water and meth before the superchargers and an aftercooler after the superchargers. Valve job, all new gaskets, rod bolts, ARP, head bolts, everything. Like I said, you got to check those things. Andrew, I'm not sure. A 2020 is going to be an L83, right? Or an L84? Ever look at an M54? Is that are you talking about the BMW motors? Is it a compound with centrifugal on centrifugal? It depends on how you're feeding them. If it could be just a twin centrifugal, if you're feeding them both into a common plenum, if you have one feeding into the other, which I don't know why you would do that, but that's possible. AMC GM86 GMC Sprint 4.3 liter V6, which obviously needs an M90 on it, right? My version of low boost is 20 on the supercharger and 20 on the turbo. Yeah, that's what I thought. So that's going to be more than 50 going in. Walter, there's lots of good twin screws out there. BMW 54, B30. Yeah, I haven't run any BMW motors on the engine dyno. I've owned a few BMWs, and I like them. But I think lots of guys have done stuff with those, right? Yeah, 20 on 20 is going to be a lot. 20 on 20 action. How's our poll doing? 51. But a compound turbo and blower be the ultimate street setup for boost. 51% saying yes, 49% saying no. It is cool. I can tell you that anytime we talk about the like that 3800 and also the Cobra motor too, can't you just add a turbo to that? Yeah, you can. they get all excited about the turbo going into the blower, about having both of them, because one of them is good, then all the rest of them have to be good. The TIC intercooler can be used as an intercooler for any kind of application, turbos, blowers, whatever you want. Walter, so you want to run a supercharger and a turbo on the K series? Thank you for all the insight you provided with engine combinations for builds. Always enjoy your reviews and dyno proof. Happy to help, David. The attack puppies are home. 51%. I kind of thought it was going to be more than that based on the response that I'd get from the videos, but that's pretty good. Yeah, now you show up. That does me no good. When using air-to-water intercoolers, what kind of heat increase in water is typical between the inlet and the outlet under boost? Obviously depends a lot, but what have you seen? I don't remember measuring the water temperature there across the or I don't remember measuring the and in and out on the water temperature. We're just measuring the charge temperature. I read somewhere the M90 uses 50 horsepower at 12,000 RPM and 10 pounds and 10 psi. I'll look and see if the guys from Kenny Bell have ever run an M90 on the dyno. I think that they have. I would kind of be surprised that it was only 50 horsepower. Nissan had a Kai class car that had a compound, supercharger and turbo setup. I remembered that I wanted one of those. I kind of just wanted that motor. Could be like a Volvo and do a supercharger and a turbo and a hybrid. Around back in 2005, we dynojet tested a few Nissan Drifter kids. 2-liter, 2.4, 4-cylinder T25, T28 combinations. Full boost came in at 2,500. They would tap out around 325 wheel horsepower. 2 T28s would be instant on a 4.8. Yeah, we ran T3s on the, which I think what the turbos that were on the SVO Mustangs and stuff, and I ran those on a B series. And that's where we were with that. That it was like, I think we got up to about 340, but only with the big hot side that we put on it. A VGT turbo blowing through a Vortex. Are you talking about a Vortex supercharger? Twin charge setup is overcomplicated. For street use, I'd choose one or the other. So what twin screw that'll give me the volumetric flow and consistency I'm looking for would you recommend on my setup? I don't know. I've been told that you should not compound a twin screw supercharger because it has internal compression. I haven't tested that yet, and I want to, but until I do, I'm gonna reserve judgment. The only ones I've ever done are roots blowers. I'll just do the compound turbo setup. Yeah, you could do that. Or a sequential or something. MR2 is factory twin charged. What would be the biggest turbo you'd recommend on a 464 valve without huge lag? Well, that's always the balance. So you'd pick the turbo based on the power output, and then you subtract based on lag. I think when we ran the stuff from HP Performance, we had twin 46s on it. And then they also had twin 57s to make a good bit more power. The Jimmy Diesels used a blower with a couple of turbos, yeah. One of those was an extractor, though, right? One of those was an Audi, and not the AUDI, the OUTIE, I guess. I don't know how to. Did you have fun on your walk, huh? Did you have fun? I sold that the twin screw is better for this because it's designed to compress, whereas the others are not as stout because they move air into the intake and not compress it. A roots blower does not have internal compression. It just moves air from one side of the blower to the other. The twin screw actually has internal compression in the design. But if you talk to Gail Banks, he'll tell you that's why it's not good for compound. I haven't run a hello. I know. You're breathing really heavy. Did you guys run up the hill or something? Huh? Go get money. Well, there you go. Close the door. Come on, go. But until I test it, and I have Kenny Bell's available to me, so I probably will be doing that. Yeah, that was Brady. He's very excited having gone for a walk with Lisa. Yep, 3 Goldens. We're all, as you can tell from that. Look at all the freaking hair I got on my jacket. You can't. The hair is everywhere. There's like tumbleweeds of hair. Rolling along, tumbleweeds. The turbo combination on the 3800, that was fun because before that, with all of the stuff, I mean, I liked going through, especially now I can go back and look at the dyno data as just dyno data and it's not headache data, because, tragedy plus time kind of thing. Now we can laugh at it. But when we finally put the turbo on there and got that working and with the intake manifold and sealed it up so it wasn't blowing into the crankcase and stuff. When we finally got all that working, then it was just so easy to make power. Whereas with the blower, it's much more of a struggle because you're, you know, if we had a blower that was twice as big or 3 times as big as four times as big, we're like, yeah, we got all the blower that we need. We don't have enough motor for how much blower we got. Are you back again? You were just here. Where's your brother? Go get your brother. Richard just switched from a dumpster fire to a TSP stage 4 turbo cam on a customer's truck. 5.3 stock bottom end, 7.6 GT45 Terminator, and 4L80 converter. Will this yield better results? I think that if you want my honest opinion, I think both of those cams are a terrible idea for that combination. I think that motor needs a much smaller cam with a single GT45. It needs to be way smaller, not bigger. A 10-year-old white lab. She should just wait every week. Yeah, these guys are like that. It's just nonstop. Something went wrong. Especially for a 5.3 and a GT45, I would put that low buck truck that I have, or a Truck Norris or Chupacabra, something small like that, because it'll have plenty of response. And even with a stock cam, you could max out what that turbo will do. Having a cam in it, like this low buck truck thing that I have, or one of those, you can easily max out the turbo. You have better turbo response. I just don't like bigger cams on that, on the GT45. Have you ever considered playing around with an OM606? I haven't. I don't know that I've ever seen one of them in person. I have big updates on the 49cc bike. It's successfully geared so I can go up hills. Was it geared before for like all of the top end before? How do you manage to not pet your dog? Well, you saw that I was petting my dog, so I'm not a big fan of dogs. They're okay. No, they're not just okay. They're all of it. My thought process is with a couple of 325 horsepower T25s or T28s on 4.3 may rival any twin charge combo above 2,500 and tap out at 650 wheel horsepower with instant response. I'm not interested in having maximum boost at like 2,000 RPM. That's on an engine dyno anyway. I'm not interested in doing that. For the street use, having the thing be responsive is good. What's the most power you've made boosted with one of the smaller cams? You can make any amount of power based on the turbo sizing with a smaller cam. It just takes more pressure. So if you have 1,000 horsepower turbo with this low buck truck cam that I have, it's 1,000 horsepower camshaft. If you have a 1,200 horsepower turbo, it's a 1,200 horsepower camshaft. The motor, the combination doesn't care. The power that you make is dictated by the turbo. And a smaller cam allows you to, within reason, allows you to have more response rate. I believe so as well, and tried to preach to him, but he is so convinced it's not the case. I told him to watch some of the videos. He's not gonna do anything with bigger cams on a 5.3 and a GT45 other than make it terrible to drive. It's not going to idle well. It's not going to have turbo response, and it's not ever going to do anything anywhere that's better. I just don't understand that. And I speak from experience, having wanted more NA power. Most of my performance life was all about, hey, let's make more NA power. That way we can make the same power at a lower boost level. That's good if that's what the goal is. But the goal for most guys is not that. And especially with a turbo, if you want 20, 30, 50 more horsepower, you just turn the boost up a little bit. Not sure how to tell what's the difference in turbo cams and NA cams. There isn't any difference. You should pick if you're picking a camshaft for your motor, you should pick the camshaft for the things that you want the motor to do NA, and then just add boost. So do you want the thing to have a really, lumpy chop? Do you want it to like scream on the big end? Do you want it to require a 3 or 4 or 5,000 RPM stall converter? Whatever the things are that you want the cam to do, pick the camshaft that does that, and then add a turbo or add a blower or add nitrous. There are some applications like for nitrous, if you want to make lots of nitrous power, then you should go out of your way to make lots of NA power, because nitrous just adds on top of whatever is there. Unlike the turbo ultimately dictates what the power is going to be. So if you want to make 1,000 horsepower, you just go buy 1,000 horsepower turbo. And then if you have a 4.8 or a 5.3 or a 6.0, there's only about a bajillion different combinations that would allow you to reach the 1,000 horsepower with your 1,000 horsepower turbo. I could find more cams that would allow you to do that than you could find cams that would not allow you to do that. The amount of cams that you could find that would not allow you to do that would probably be, I don't know, 5 or 10. Richard, did I hear you correctly at the beginning of the video? Did you custom order a new grind for the 3800? Yeah, yes, I did. I had a custom cam made that, and the only reason that I had to have it made was the cam core that they had would only allow a specific range of things, lift and duration. And then I even have to use a specific rocker ratio with it because of the available lobe lift that they were able to make. I voted no because twin charging is complicated and it can cause serious packaging issues in a street car. Can we run NA on a turbo application? Yes, you can run a turbo with any camshaft. So if we go take a turbo and put it on a stock LS motor from the wrecking yard, that camshaft was not designed for a turbo, right? It was designed to run as an NA truck motor. Put a turbo on it, works perfect, works flawlessly. An LS9 camshaft designed for a factory supercharged LS9 motor. Put a turbo on it. Works exactly like it's supposed to. It just does whatever the cam does. The turbo just multiplies whatever's there. So if it's soft down low, it'll still be soft down low. If it's good on top, it'll still be good on top. If you add the same amount of boost, the curve will be exactly the same. It'll just be elevated everywhere. So that's why I said, pick the camshaft to do what you want it to do NA. There's not a turbo camshaft. There's not a blower camshaft. There's not a nitrous camshaft. There's not any of that stuff. Richard, any disadvantage of locking out the distributor on a 383 and getting rid of the vacuum advance? There's a great deal of disadvantages for that if you're driving the car around. Going camping with my dad tomorrow. Going to start clearing trees for a dirt track. Cannibalize the Dakota for my Safari RX-7 project. Very cool. I like that you're building a track. That's awesome. Yes, more doggies. Well, we don't need any more doggies. We have enough doggies, but the dogs are awesome. How much lift are we talking about on the Truck North? This a Truck Norris cam is like near 550 lift. Love to try, but the lift really has very little to do with the performance of the camshaft. Love to try an LSA on my LS2 with remote T6 88 millimeter. Lag is terrible with the big turbo, but touches 1,000 horsepower once wound up. Yeah, an 88 would definitely do that. If you're 1,000 horsepower, yeah. That's a really big turbo for 1,000 horsepower. Are you trying to make more than that? Because an 88 will certainly support more than that. A T6 88 will support probably 50% more than that if it's a good 88. How much power do you need to hold two Goldens? We just have trouble getting to stay in the back seat of the truck. Milo actually rides in the back. He's a truck dog. I voted no because I think the blower makes too much low-end flow, which makes it easy to rapidly spool mid-sized turbos. I think a large turbo, skip the blower, lag threshold, traction control. Okay. Dan, you're all in on all of it? What about overlap? Yes, it works with overlap. If you can show me a camshaft, an NA camshaft that has overlap, that makes power NA and doesn't do it under boost, I'll be very surprised. I think using a small turbo restrictive to drive at 2,000 RPM under boost would be as efficient as running NA. You want to run boost at under 2,000 RPM? I don't think that that's a good idea for anything other than possibly a diesel application where you're towing something. Would be cool to see a collab with Luke from Diesel Pump UK. I don't know who that is. I'll have to look that up. I don't do very much diesel stuff. I'm not really a diesel guy. I'm about to boost my F-Body LS3 with a Procharger. Okay. For a Procharger, if you're wanting to make lots of power and you're wanting to get everything out of that Procharger, then I would do a different thing than I do with turbos. I would actually pick a motor that makes more power at the top of the RPM range, because centrifugal superchargers make power with RPM because that's where they start making boost. So I would tailor a combination differently for the Procharger than I would for a turbo. I wouldn't put a mild camshaft on a Procharger if you're trying to max the Procharger out. I think he's after the sound. Yeah. That's again, that's why we have so many different camshafts, because people want different things. That's why there's not a best cam. That's why there's not an optimum cam. That's why there's no camshaft that's the best possible camshaft for even for if you take one combination and say, hey, look, here's the combination. It's a 5.3 with 243 heads on it and ring gap and a Trailblazer SS intake manifold. What's the best cam for that? There's no way that one person comes up with one camshaft that makes more power than every other camshaft at every RPM. You can't do that. And also, even if you could, let's say one had the best average power production from, I don't know, 2,000 to 7,000 RPM. I'd really like to see that. But that's not why people buy that cam. That's not why people buy a cam for that combination. A guy's idea of that combination, he may want it to idle like a stock motor. He may want a stock camshaft in it. He may want something that just has the chop. He may want something that only works with the stock converter. I'm not going any bigger than something that works with a stock converter. There are all sorts of these things that people have that's their own version, their own definition of best. That's why there's not that camshaft available. It's not, that's a myth. The other day I saw Miata with a monster truck treatment. Very cool. So is the difference just marketing in the camshafts? No, I think that people design camshafts because they think that it's going to be better for that kind of thing. And maybe it is I'm going to give some of them the benefit of the doubt and say maybe it is as an absolute thing if you're trying to max out a turbo for some given class. But you do not have to put anything that's labeled turbo cam in your motor, because if that was the case, then the motor would not run with a stock camshaft and a turbo, and it runs fantastic. Guess what? It does exactly what it does when it's NA. It idles nice. It uses a stock converter. With the turbo comes up because it has good low speed power. It does all of those things, and it does the same thing with all the other camshafts. Still interested in seeing a 1NZ FXE or Prius engine. Turbo on account of the weird cam intake compression thing that has going on. I don't know anything about that Prius engine. I haven't looked into it to see what they have going on. I'm sure you don't want any more dogs. No, I did. The two that we got, I was not looking for more dogs when we got those. I was tricked into that by my wife and my kids. What's the highest lift and duration you can run on 243 heads on a 4.8? The lift is not really relevant. The duration is what's going to stop you. And actually a 4.8, because of the short stroke, probably has less piston to valve clearance than the others do, because of the acceleration rate away from toward and away from TDC, I think. But it's going to be something in the mid 230s is normally where the danger zone is. Use sequential turbos with a little bit of nitrous at low speeds. We start talking about using the blower to light the turbos. I define the max horsepower goal, then go undersize with just enough turbo to meet the goal for maximum response. That's the thing. That's what you have to do. You have to decide any excess power you leave on the table that you're not using. So if you buy 1,000 horsepower turbo, but I'm only ever using 700 horsepower worth of it, That other 300 horsepower, that's turbo lag. That's on the other side. You could have a smaller turbo that would be more responsive if you only need a 700 horsepower turbo, even if you moved it from 1,000 down to 800 so that you have a little bit more, it would be more responsive. If I put twin turbos on a 532 big block with 1471, there will be problems moving enough exhaust through the turbos once the blower is spinning at higher RPM. No, you could put big enough turbos on it that a 1471 powered 532, whatever power that was making, you could add more to that with the turbo. The thing that's going to be in the way is the blower. The blower is going to be in the way of the turbos being able to provide the amount of airflow that they could provide through that. Just like with this, this is just a smaller version. The 3800 with the M90 and a turbo is just a smaller iteration of what you're talking about there. Can you explain why Gale Banks thinks it won't work with a turbo? What, the twin screw? I'm going to build the track very hippie-like, mostly thin trees. Cool. What injectors do you typically run on the LS? I have really two sets that I run more than anything else. One is a set of 80s because that fills in most of the stuff that I do is sub 1,000 horsepower. And if we run something that's very high horsepower and or E85, then I have a set of I think 1500s from Snake Eaters, and those have worked pretty well for me. 542 valve, approximately what RPM would be safe to start really hitting it with boost? Well, that motor, a 542 valve is probably a 5,500 RPM motor. So from 2,500 to 5,500 or something, and not with a lot of boost there. I don't think. I don't know what you're trying to do with it, and I don't know if it's stock. Ford Procharger 5-liter F-150 is the single best family hauler out there. That's good. You should have an opinion. Todd Warren cams thinks he can find the best cam for specific modular 4.6 liter. Okay, I don't know who that is or nor what he does, but I can tell you that people that think that haven't spent a lot of time on the dyno and or haven't spent a lot of time understanding what customers want, because if they understood what the definition of best is, they would know that theirs is subjective. He may think that he can make what he determines is the best cam, but he cannot make what everybody determines is the best cam for modular 4.6s. There's no way. The reason that he can't is not because he's not a sharp cam guy or doesn't know a lot about modular forge. It's because he doesn't know what that definition is. And nobody does. There isn't one definition for that. And that's the problem. You have a moving target and nobody can hit that. Always thought a turbo blower can minimize scavenging. Why would it do that? My personal toy is almost the same build, but I'm using an Elgin 1840, and just the butt dyno says it's out. It'll outrun him. Comes up on boost sooner. Feels like it pulls harder. Yeah, is an 1840? Which one is that? I don't know what those numbers are. Is it a 1, a 1.5, a 2, or a 3? BMWs on the 335i's have compound turbos. There's 2 changeover valves for nice transition. Cool. What I would like to do is, and I don't like the Prius as well. I like the Honda Insight. I would like to put the Sprint motor in an Insight, or some kind of turbo diesel in one of those. BMW 335D, not a 335i. So the diesel version of that compound set for diesels is pretty common. Mine is also a stock bottom end GT45. Only difference is 317s on mine. Not that I think they're any better, but I feel mine is a better combo in the power department. If yours has a smaller cam, it would be a better combo. The 317s are going to hurt you in terms of response and ultimate power compared to a 706 head at the same boost level. But if you have a smaller cam, your combination is going to be better. I have an observation about overlap on a turbo setup. I think if there's a lot of overlap, the change will not be the same as if the cam had less overlap because the scavenging will not happen. So are you saying that from a theoretical standpoint, or are you saying that from the fact that you have 5,000 or 6,000 dyno pulls from different cams that have different overlaps and have done exactly the same thing that they did NA? I'm not calling you out. I'm just saying that that's the data that I have. And that's why I'm making that statement. I'm not making it because I'm an engineer and I think something will happen and I want something to happen. I'm saying that every time I've run a camshaft and I try to always run them NA, when I run them NA, regardless of what the overlap is, if we put a turbo on it and the turbo makes like we have the boost controlled, so it makes 10 pounds, it makes exactly the same curve. It's just elevated everywhere. No matter what camshaft we put in there, that's what happens. So there isn't a camshaft where all of a sudden it goes, oh no, I'm unhappy now. I don't want to do that. There isn't that. At least I haven't found that yet. And I've challenged all of these cam manufacturers to show me when that happens. Show me a camshaft where it doesn't do what I'm saying. And then I'll show you 10,000 of them that do. So if you can show me one, that would be cool. And I'd like to see that. And I'd like to figure out why. But I will be able to show you 10,000 camshafts that do that. In fact, I challenged one guy to go to his cam catalog and say, you could pick any camshaft in there you want. Pick me one that's not a turbo cam. Pick me one that doesn't do what I'm saying. Because when I say every cam's a turbo cam, I don't just mean that you can run a turbo on a camshaft, which you obviously could. You could run nitrous on anything or a blower on anything. And hey, look, it runs. That's not the metric for me. The metric is that when I run it, it does this. And then when I add boost to it, it does that. And that's what they do. And every time I've tried one, that's what it's done. So until it doesn't do that, I'll just stick by that. You should call Iski and talk to him about turbo grinds. I have talked to the guys at Iski at MPMC conference. Going to have the world record fastest insight next. The guys have already done that. I think Hassport probably technically has the fastest insight that I know of. I mean, maybe there are other Bonneville guys that have run them because it's really, really aerodynamic. It's bordering on like a streamliner. 50 miles per gallon, 100 in the quarter. Yep. I didn't look and see what the sprint did. We didn't really have quarter mile. We did a standing mile. I was wondering if a max effort centrifugal supercharger cam wouldn't try to beef up the mid range. Again, the maximum effort for peak power would be a different thing than what you're describing, Kyle. But that is a good thing. That's exactly why there are so many different camshafts, because one guy may want, like we were talking about the other night about the LS9 cam having, being soft down low and in the middle and just being good on the top. Is that a good match for a centrifugal blower? Because it's essentially doing that too. Well, yes, with more RPM, more efficiency, more power at the top. Those two go together. But what if you wanted a camshaft that didn't do that? What if you wanted a camshaft that made almost or even all that power, but also a bunch more in the middle so that you could fill in the area where the centrifugal blower is lacking in terms of boost response? That would also be good, but that would be a personal preference, and that's why we can't have the best cam. What comes after a mild cam? A medium-sized cam? A mild-esque cam? Do you think you could run twin 90s? Guys have done it. I've seen them on eBay. I mean, not on YouTube. What you're saying is the reason why I'm curious about the Prius engine turbo. Cam is weird and odd. I'd like to see what's different about it. What they've done to try to. I don't know what they were trying to achieve. I'd have to do a kind of a deep dive down and see what the Prius thing is all about. If is it a Miller cycle? It probably wouldn't be a Miller cycle because I don't think that motor's not supercharged, right? I understand you're referring to performance cams, not weird MPG setups and hybrids from 2005. No, it's the same. I mean, it should. I don't know why it wouldn't apply to, because we talk about most things I talk about go from a stock cam to above the line on the stock cam, but there's no reason it shouldn't go the other way too. I don't know. Maybe when you start getting into weird asymmetrical designs or reverse pattern cams or those kinds of things, maybe there's something going on there that I don't know about. There is something going on that side of it that I haven't tested, so I would be less likely to make the statement for cams that I haven't tested. But all the ones I've tested, I would stand by those statements. Do you think that two blowers would make more power than one blower, if that's what your question is? I do know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese in Paris. Dan, don't disrespect the Sprint. Mild cam is a 1/4 race cam. I think that some of the stock cams are 1/8. Schmedium, that's it. Extra schmedium. The Prius uses a high compression engine with some wacky cam timing to reduce compression and increase efficiency. Does performance cam or turbo cam thing you're talking about go in line with diesels? I don't know anything about diesel camshafts. I have never even looked at any specs on a diesel cam, so don't know anything about them. And I'd need to figure out how all of that works before I would talk about that. Special agent. I have tested mufflers. We tested a lot of different mufflers back when I did Engine Masters, because we had to run mufflers on the entry that I did for Engine Masters. So we ran a bunch of different style mufflers and lengths and diameters and stuff. But I don't know that that's relevant to, and I've done one test that video is up where we ran headers with collector extensions and then collector extensions and mufflers, but the straight through MagnaFlow mufflers, all 3-inch. And then we took that off and put a full 2.5-inch full exhaust catback, all that stuff on that too, to see what the difference was. Given the amount of power change that we got from that, unless you had a really restrictive muffler, I don't know that you're going to see a big change there. My Sprint Turbo is fast, man. What do you think about an LSA supercharger on a 5.3? I think guys have done it and it works good. If anything, it's a better size blower for the 5.3 than for a 6.2 because it can support a lot of power. The simulated Atkins cycle, I'll have to look that up. What was the cam you're referring to recently as the 5-force cam? That's the one that Brian Nutter did for Summit. That was the big nasty cam, I think. It was just a cam with like a whole bunch of overlap and all the chop and stuff. Do you see horsepower gains on cam swaps and NA engines? Yeah. So when you add a camshaft to an NA engine, you make more power. So we're going to shut off our poll at 54%. We want to see the 544 valve Navigator engine again. I don't have that motor anymore. I haven't ever taken the Sprint to Bonneville because the Sprint got stolen. I only took it to the Maxted Mile. Sounds like the worst cam for a turbo, right? So does it still work is the question. The question about what? About you're still talking about the Prius engine? Yeah, the Sprint. Sean, you've been here a bunch. You haven't listened to that story about the Sprint getting stolen when we were prepping it for Bonneville? Will you put the M90 back on the Silverado? I want to get that running right. But I need to get my thing is still doing the same thing with some sort of battery deal. And I bought a new battery for it. So obviously that's not it. Easy there, Dan. How many cars do you have? I don't have very many. The Sprint got stolen, so I don't have that anymore. With more overlap on a cam, reduced turbo lag. Did it improve low speed power? That's what you have to focus on. Did the camshaft that you put in increase low speed power? If it increased low speed power, it will improve boost response. I did not find another Sprint, but I found a Metro. So that's the next best thing. And on that note, folks, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. And I will be back tomorrow. You got to go to the solve